Thanks, everybody. Today's a really special webinar for a couple of reasons. One is I have an esteemed colleague with me, Todd Wester, and I'll introduce him in just a second, as we work together in the Livingston Public Schools in Livingston, Montana. I also have two children going back to school right now, and it's a split schedule. Some days online, some days in person, and it's changing every day. And the other thing is that one of the families I worked with graciously felt so strongly about this that they are agreeing to show part of the meeting that we had on Zoom with Todd present. So not only do we get to go into what are some of the issues, but you get to see it in action, the stress, but also the victories that the family is doing. And even today, it's changing all the time for this family. So I don't get to do as many webinars as I like where you actually go from theory to practice. So with that, I want to ask you guys a question, if you could put this in the chat bar, if you wouldn't mind, is the question I have is, how many of you, like me, and probably Todd as well, are feeling the stress that your parents are sharing as they transition their children back to school? So how many of you are feeling this kind of stress? So let me just see some of you who are also saying it. Okay, so we've got Rush, Lisa, Heather, double time. Oh, Lordy, yes. Okay. So I think, Todd, we're in the right place with people today. Because everybody's feeling it. Yes, absolutely. Okay. We got a feisty group today, a lot of explanation points. So thank you, guys. So as we go through, one of the things I want to share with you is that these are the symptoms to look for, and these symptoms are going to be what we're going to be tackling with this family today, with the help of Todd as well, that you're going to see. This session happened last week, actually. You're going to see a lot of anxiety going on. All the stress is amplified. So when you have any kind of what we call a situational crisis, I'll define that. If you had stress or dysfunction in the family before COVID, it just gets amplified after, like a loudspeaker. There's a lack of role clarity. When you're starting to move a child back to school, everybody's roles have to be clarified. You know, what is the role of the special ed department? What is the role of the parents? What is the role of the teacher? And everybody's so stressed that sometimes it's hard to take a pause and figure out what are our roles, and without role clarity, you've got chaos. You have so many silos going on right now. Even before COVID, of course, but even after COVID, it's even more risk of silos between the parent system, the school system, etc. We have to troubleshoot. What are you going to do if the child just takes the mask off? What are you going to do if the child refuses to go to class? If you don't troubleshoot ahead of time with the family, and you are in a reactive position instead of proactive, the child will eat your lunch. We have to have, Lucas and Ryan, the two children that we're going to highlight today, they're about to go into an IEP meeting on Friday. We have this meeting before the IEP. Without a clear written plan, the IEP meetings aren't as effective as what they need to be. And the school and parents have to work more together. So our role is like a facilitator to help bring these systems together so they work more efficiently and effectively in a very proactive way instead of reactive. So I'm going to give you tools that you can use the next day or even today that is going to hit each one of these bullet points here. So today, here's my promise, like a pinky promise. When you leave here, you are going to know why family systems trauma is so needed during this transition. I'll make hopefully a good case for it. And Todd's going to also underscore some of the points that he sees as an administrator. And then, because of time, I don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. I want to focus on one technique really well, and the technique I want to highlight is the benefits of the village. Who before what? Todd is one of the heroes in this story. You'll see why as you watch the video clips. But you can imagine, if you would, when you watch the video, what would the session be like without Todd? What would have happened without the village? Who before what? I'm going to explain that in a moment. So this is Livingston, Montana. I don't want you to get too jealous, okay? It's a small town next to Bozeman, small but mighty. I live here full-time with my family, and I want to introduce you to Todd Wester, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Livingston, Montana Public Schools. So Todd, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background, how we met, and also some of those things from your point of view as some of the top COVID transition challenges you're feeling right now or seeing. So thanks for joining us today as a special guest panelist.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. My pleasure to be here. And, I grew up in Montana. Livingston is a special place. And I think we've, for a long time, thought of ourselves as a place where there was sort of a rural immunity to things like addiction and mental health issues and pandemics even. And what we've found out as the world has become more and more global is that we're not immune to any of those things. And in fact, our community in our region of the Rocky Mountains has faced enormous spike in suicidality. We're one of the highest suicide rate areas in the world. And so, really all of the issues that affect everyone everywhere now affect us equally or even perhaps more intensely. I did have the good opportunity to meet you, Scott, we had a student meeting taking place, and Scott stepped in with a little bit different approach than I had seen taken to a meeting before, and talked about the importance of treating the family as a unit and the importance of the village, having people throughout the community kind of all on board with a particular plan, a very nicely scripted plan, and how that plan would be enforced with the student. The major concerns I have related to COVID right now are around what I see with the students. So for example, just today I learned we've had a few positive cases at our high school, and as a function of those positive cases, we now have a larger number of families. We went from 40 families going fully off-site to now 60 families requesting instruction fully off-site. And with that comes isolation from friends. It's clear that there's fear among the students and families that they might catch or spread COVID. There's fear about losing loved ones. And really, I think what's really tough for our adolescent population is just that, the kind of life that we would expect them to be leading, where they're playing in sports and they're having lots of socialization, is temporarily suspended. So we're definitely seeing a spike in the way kids are presenting with socio-emotional issues right now, and it's a great concern for us.
Yeah, as we were talking before, you said something I thought was interesting, is that you're running out of teachers. You don't have substitute teachers, so if teachers start going down, you may have to go close the schools because of lack of workforce. And I wouldn't have thought that at the beginning, but there is a cause and effect. Is that something that you're battling with right now?
Absolutely. For our students and for our staff, right now, the CDC recommendations are, if you have a sore throat or anything that's just not really normal for you, you should stay home. And so that has us minus a lot of staff. We're not able to get substitutes because most of our substitute teachers are parents themselves and needing to stay home with kids who are on offsite days. So yes, it's a very functional thing there, just having enough staff to serve.
And a segue for this case is that what I also see as a cause and effect is that the tolerance level of the teachers is much less. If the child comes in and had behavioral problems before COVID last year, which these two kids did have, if they aren't starting off out of the gate fast, where we're like, they're doing really well fast, there's no room for error to, have this long runway. And that's something that why I think I'm so passionate about this model, because we have to give the tools immediately. It's a time of action, not problem exploration. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what I see among my fellow administrators is just a concern that, a lot of times we would say, it's not a matter of life or death if we, treat this situation right now. Well, right now it's viewed as if it is perhaps a matter of life or death. And so, if the child isn't wearing a mask, just with these recent cases that we had, it reinforced that we can't mess around with that. We really have to enforce the mask rule. So suddenly, yes, that becomes something that's immediate.
Yeah, excellent. And so here, I think, thank you for that. And I like your moose, by the way, behind you. I think that's really cool. So anyways, I also want to share with people that as they stay on to the end, there's going to be a bonus that I want to share with you that I think you'll really enjoy, that's going to help you immediately and immensely with what we're talking about today. So whatever reason you guys are here, I want to thank you personally for being part of the Family Systems Trauma community. So let's get started. We're going to look at this problem through this lens, family systems trauma. And as we go on, I want you guys to have fun today, turn off any distractions, because I want to assure you that what I'm going to present to you today is more than just a webinar. What you experience really does work. Now, just where this comes from is I put together the Family Trauma Institute about 2.5 years ago with the mission is to help people become better at family trauma work. What I saw as a missing niche was we were doing great work with individuals who are traumatized, but we needed to bridge the gap to work with the traumatized family, and then Todd's underscoring the traumatized community, okay? And more now than ever do we need to look at this problem from a systems point of view. So the first book I wrote was for working with out-of-control teenagers. This book, 10 Years in Development, I'm going to be sharing from this book today. It's an evidence-based model called PLL. And for those of you who want to delve into some of the research studies that have been done with this model, please go to familytrauma.com and just hit the About section and look at the research. So these core techniques from this book has 12 tools. And one of the things that I always wanted to do as a teacher was have people leave with the step-by-step tools. I like theory like the next person, but I want to have concrete things I can use the next day that work. So what I'm going to be highlighting today is number 6, engaging the extended family. And if you're really inspired today and want to learn these other 11 techniques, I'll share with you how. So imagine, this is what I hope that you'll feel at the end of the day, start with the end in mind, that you're going to use these tools. You're going to walk into a parent-teacher conference tomorrow or with the parents without the teachers. You're going to have more confidence, more swag, and you're going to see, using these techniques, that you're going to get immediate results with the family. So let's go to number 1. Why is this needed? And then I'm going to ask Todd to comment on this in a second, right before we show the video. First thing why this is needed is there's 3 reasons I want to give why this is such an important lens. First is what's called a situational crisis. I'll define that and why we're in one right now. The second one is, what is the definition, or what do I mean by simultaneous trauma? And number three, why in a crisis situation it requires action in the here and now and not as much problem exploration because people are in crisis, they're out of balance. And that's what we're in right now. We're in a crisis situation. So what is a situational crisis? Well, this is an unexpected event. Could be a natural disaster like you don't have time to prepare for it, like a hurricane, a tornado, or in this case, a pandemic. What happens is that the family doesn't have a handbook on this situational crisis. They can't prepare for it. They're immediately thrown into a state of crisis, and it ebbs and flows. So before school started, the family might have kind of taken a deep breath. Then you've got school that propels another crisis. And each time we have a change, the family is propelled into a state of unbalance. So what happens is simultaneous trauma, number two, is that all the members of the family are directly affected by the traumatic event. And like an auto accident, a natural disaster. So that means that if we're just working with the child and the family is just as traumatized, you're missing the mark of really getting where you need to go quickly with the family because there's simultaneous trauma, not just trauma with the individual. And this crisis affects everybody in the family. Again, when systems are unbalanced, there's what's called a state of disequilibrium. And that's why sometimes it can be a good thing, because that's why they say crisis presents opportunity. Because if somebody's an alcoholic and they hit bottom, they're in a state of disequilibrium and they have a short window of opportunity to make a huge change. But if we don't seize on that opportunity, they can actually go back to status quo or get worse. So a crisis doesn't last forever, but right now people are more open to change and innovation because they're just drinking out of a fire hose right now. So with crisis presents opportunity for new ideas and new ways of thinking. So again, a crisis is not a time for problem exploration, but a time of action. So you're going to see that this model is a therapy of action, and it works with the entire family and the community. And you can see here, this picture is worth 1,000 words. This family needs action. So I'm going to ask Todd to comment a little bit about his experiences with this family in a second. Sarah is a single-parent mom. She has been suffered domestic violence for many, many years. That man is out of her life, but there's still what's called fallout from the domestic violence. The boys, she's got to raise 4 boys. The 2 boys you're going to see on the videotape today are not see them, but they're going to be talked about, is Ryan and specifically Ryan and also Lucas. She also has younger boys, Gavin and Zane. And another situational, not crisis, but another disequilibrium event is Dad had just come in the picture. Now, this wasn't the dad that committed the domestic violence, but he's coming from another state. He's living in a tent right now in the backyard. He doesn't have any money, but he's here for his children. So while that's a good thing, you'll see on the videotape, it also causes stress on Sarah because she's like, what's his role going to be? How are we going to work together as co-parents? So there's a lot of things going on. So Todd, as you worked with this family and we worked with this family with Candace, I've been in the role of consultant. You'll see the therapist. Candace is the therapist. What has been your experience with this family? And what kind of barriers are they going to be facing with COVID?
Well, my experience with the family before I met you, Scott, was I was called upon because the boys were having trouble in school. One was coming back out of a residential placement, and we were going to work with him at youth day treatment. And what I could see happening in our system, what often happens in schools, which is that we tend to, look upstream for where the problem came from. Was it the child didn't receive the right kind of instruction last year, or maybe we pass the blame a little further and we say, well, what's the mom have to do with this? And then we talk to the mom, and maybe the mom says, well, it's the dad's fault, But I would
Right.
say that we did have, I would say that I personally had a tendency to look at this situation as if mom was not enforcing limits well enough. And maybe I'll say more later, but I learned a lot as we started to work through this case.
And with this family, how is COVID stressing them out from your point of view?
Right, thanks. So, for a family where, the boys are what we would normally term school avoidant. So in some ways, the restrictions of COVID and having to stay at home kind of fed into, their desire not to be at school. But I think that what's really going to be a challenge for the family is that, re-engaging school and coming back in and having, developing that sense that this is an important thing to be a part of, the socialization process of school and the learning process. So I worry a fair amount about that. And I do have some concerns moving forward that, like we said, if a student presents with any kind of an ailment, whether we can observe that ailment or not, we have to send them home. And so that could be reinforcing an unwanted behavior if we do that. So we have to have a new plan.
I remember our initial challenge we were faced with is how the system, i.e. school, defined the problem. Like, both boys have been traumatized. They have emotional and behavioral issues. And so with Ryan, who we're going to be talking about in this video clip, people didn't see him as stubborn, stuck in a rut. They saw him like frail, incapable. And Ryan sometimes used that to his advantage.
Yes.
And so that is always a struggle, because it's like, okay, how much is the trauma that we excuse, and how much is it straight out, limits, clarity of roles, and how we define the problem will determine how we treat it. And I think there's the COVID situation is exacerbated. Do we treat them as frail, walk on eggshells, or do we come together and say we need some limits and consistency? Have you seen that battle going on with Ryan a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, the community coming together first and saying, okay, how are we going to define that sweet spot between, being compassionate enough, but also setting some limits so that there's a sense of security around, what the reaction is going to be if a certain thing happens.
Yep. Well, let's go on and see what happens here. This is going to be interesting. What happens next? So here we see the second benefit is the village, and you represent the village here, Todd. And I want to give you kudos, and let me explain why in a second here. So when I was doing treatment in my early years, I focused on the what before the who. And what I mean by that is I only saw the person that came into my office. I didn't even think about, the extended family or the community. And it cost me dearly, especially in today's situation. So what I mean by that is where this kind of originated, this idea, came from a business book, ironically, where Jim Collins in the book Good to Great said that when he interviewed CEOs of companies, and he said the top companies, the CEOs would say, when I hire somebody or try to unstick my company, I start with who before what. I want to get the right people on the bus. I want to get the wrong people off the bus. And I want to get the right people in the right seats. And so immediately, I know that we don't have a lot of time to spare. We got to come out of the gate fast. When Ryan and Lucas start school, we have to have the plan. So I'm thinking to myself, who before what? I call you and say, Todd, can you come on this Zoom call? In some ways, I like Zoom better because I can get people instantly into the meeting regardless of where they are. It's convenient. So in some ways, Zoom has been a good thing, or it speeds up things where I can get the right people on the bus quickly from different states or whatever. So the problem is when I first learned family therapy, it scared me to death because I was familiar with the wraparound philosophy, but when people came into the room, I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know what their roles were. I didn't know, and oftentimes it was scary because people were loaded for bear or loaded for moose, I guess in this case, and nobody knew why they were there. So here, to counteract that, I know that if I want to get a case unstuck, I got to get the right people on the bus. So a key learning point is that I have to have a pre-written agenda with clear goals in the meeting. General MacArthur once said, every battle is won before the first shot is ever fired. And I like that metaphor in that when I am about to do a Zoom call, I pretend I'm a CEO of a company and I want to make sure I send out the agenda ahead of time. I want to run it like a board meeting where we've got, clear, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. Now, when I meet face to face, I don't have to worry as much about that. But especially with telemedicine, I got to get right to the point. Again, the idea of working smarter, not harder. So here's the agenda. The people expected in attendance is myself as the consultant, the therapist, the mom, the dad. The boys aren't there right now because we've got to at least get on the same page as adults before we bring the boys in. You're there. Anne was going to be there, but she couldn't make it. But again, everybody sent this agenda ahead of time. And you may think, agenda is not that important, but especially when you're in a crisis, it's a time for action. So here, the overall goals of the meeting with the agenda are we have to pre-prep for Friday's IEP meeting. We have to go through a working draft of the school contract and together in a co-collaborative way make changes. Todd, your role is clarified right off the bat. You're going to answer questions and provide guidance. And then you would exit the meeting, which you did, so we can clarify parents' roles, household chores, and next step. So let me pause here and say, Todd, do you think the agenda was important, and how important was it for this meeting? What's your thoughts on that, and how important agendas are like this?
Well, I agree with you completely. I think agendas are crucial. It frames the discussion. It kind of sets the sideboards on what we're going to talk about, and kind of it tacitly says what we're not going to talk about. And so I think it was crucial to this meeting and helped us to have a really efficient and focused meeting.
Was it helpful to know what your role was going to be before you even got on the call?
Yeah, I think clarification of roles is really important as well. And that's partly because I play a lot of different roles within our district. And so, knowing kind of what tasks I'm going to be asked to perform at a particular meeting or what role I can play, it's very helpful. I would imagine
my agenda also is to help you become my co-therapist. I know that, if your roles are clarified, I have to work a lot less harder in the session because you come with some, real expertise. And so I've got to work smarter, not harder. And if you don't know what your role is, then you're not going to be a great co-therapist. And so for me, you're going to be seeing the kids every day. You're going to be working with the administrators and the teachers. You're a key person. So if I just start with what before who, like what's the goal of treatment? No, we got to also have who needs to be on the bus. That's really important. So it's helped therapy go quicker with speed. because I got the right people on the bus. And in fact, I'll ask the audience, as you guys watch this session, remember I said at the beginning, imagine what the session would have been like without you there, Todd. So let's go to the first click here. The video clips so you can see this part here. So here, I want to show you what the agenda looks like in this part, where it attacks the lack of role clarity with role clarity. It breaks down silos. It starts to troubleshoot. It's a written plan. The school and family are more together. So as you watch this clip, see how this is like kryptonite or an anti-venom to these particular issues that we have to counter with healthy, what I call undercurrents. So here's the key learning point. Start with the end in mind with your agenda and get your co-therapist in line as much as possible. So here, you're going to see in the video clip that we start off with Ryan's goals for the school year. What do we want? What's the end in mind? And so we say, do we want him to consistently have no behavioral problems? Do we want him to go from day treatment to go back 100% to regular Park High School? He's got 3 periods right now. We want him to go 100% and gain confidence. Now, one of the things in these IEP meetings sometimes is we don't always talk about confidence. But when a child doesn't have confidence, they don't do well. So I bring you in at this moment and say, how can we help in a COVID environment? We can't do wrestling right now. Is there something we could do to instill confidence? And here, let's watch the video clip on this in action. Is the goal that we have to get in his homework consistently with no behavioral disruptions? Is the goal to move 100% back to Park High School? Is the goal to gain more confidence in himself through sports, working out, etc.? And is the goal for him to maintain a C or B minus or B plus or B grade point average or an A? But I just wanted to pause here and see if those goals are reasonable, or you would tweak them, change them, or add to them. So I'll ask you guys as parents, what do you think?
I think those are perfect.
I agree.
Okay. What grade point average would you like to see for Ryan? That it would be like, this is a real success. I mean, what we're doing is working. It's kind of a measurable outcome. Is C a good grade point average? B? It's up to you guys. What do you think?
Anywhere in between C and D. I mean, I think that's a fair. That's not expecting too much of him, and I think it's a fair. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistent grade point average in C and D would be absolutely perfect.
Well, I got lucky here. I hit them all. Okay. The confidence through sports, working out. Todd, with COVID-19, and of course, we don't know how long this is going to be, or if we're going to get a vaccine or whatever it is. But I always found that Ryan had a lot of energy, and so does Lucas. And I'm just wondering if, while we're contending for school, could we have simultaneously contending for confidence, working out, sports?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Scott. I wanted to ask Sarah and Patrick about this. We've had some success in the past. Interestingly, a lot of the kids really connect with the PE teachers in actually both buildings, at SGMS and at Park High. At Park High, Ben Hahn is one of our PE coaches. The other one is Megan Burns. And they are fantastic at, kind of sometimes reaching some kids that have a little tougher time with getting through the day in other ways. So I would definitely want us to reach out to one of the two of them, depending on who he ends up with for PE. And then the two things that I would encourage us to develop in him, one would be, if he wants to be involved in a sport, by all means, let's do everything we can to facilitate that. And there are options in the fall yet. I don't think it's too late to join. You could potentially join cross country or football or soccer. I don't know. I know that some of the varsity selections have been made for soccer, but so the sport aspect is one thing. The other thing, though, that he could really get from Ben and Megan is a lot of practice in good lifetime physical activity habit. And so this is the kind of thing that he can take anywhere with him. And so I think that having those two as options in front of us, his emotional affect and his health are likely to improve if he has access to those two things.
Now, Dr. Scott, you and I had a conversation this weekend about possibly me and the boys going to the gym. And I think they would both excel at that because it's something that we do as a group. Mm-hmm. Does anybody know if the gym's even open here in town right now? It is. Yeah. I mean, especially if I move downtown, it'll be right by the house. Yeah. And I think it would be great for the boys to, actually do something with me. And I think it would encourage them to stick with it. And to be honest with you, I'm 40. It wouldn't hurt me at all to work out a little bit. So.
Yeah, me too. There is I wanted to reach out and give you a hug during that interchange because, that was a game changer. I was so appreciative of you, Todd. That I would never even thought of that, the emotional, the health, and then you see a chain reaction happen where the dad says, you know what, I could use it too. I don't know, Todd. I just was really impressed. What were you feeling at that moment? Were you getting excited too? You could just see the energy change.
Yeah.
Feel it. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you? I was really impressed. I should have paid you for this session. You know what I mean?
Not at all. I think that what was really impressive about it was seeing how far the family had come to that point. We really were not in a place like this a year ago, not even close. And I think that what you said before about the roles, defining those roles, the implicit in that is that you trusted me. And I think you do a great job of that. I've seen you working with others in some of our larger meetings, and one of the things that you do is you empower everybody there to be able to contribute to the solution. And so that's all I think I was doing there. But and it happened to work out that it was the right thing. It struck a chord, and I'm very happy about that. It was a nice moment.
Well, you really emphasize it. Imagine what that would have been like without you there. I don't know. The agenda helped. All the infrastructure was there. But, man, you kicked it out of the park. And then when I saw Dad get into it, he still, even today, goes, hey, can we go to the gym? And so it's stimulating. I always believe that families will do well if they can, but they sometimes lack the tools. So in this environment, having the family together, I think, but having the administrators like yourself is key. So you do something else that's great here, okay? You put out a document that I'm going to share with everybody that's brilliant. I'm not just saying that. It's called a multi-approach of organizing the entire school system. So I believe stepping on a moving train rather than parked on the station, which means when I read that document, I'm thinking to myself, I got to integrate this document into this meeting. And I try that, and it works pretty well, I think. But let's go through the document, because I think the family needs confidence that we got their backs, that if they're going to go forward, do we have their backs? So let me show you this part, or this is part 2. and then we'll have time for questions at the end for everybody. I hope a lot of people are asking questions or make comments. So let's go on here. So the next thing that here, again, just the key takeaways of that video before we move on is we zoomed out with the end in mind. We had a tactical advantage of who before what, you were the who, and we had a ripple effect of a co-therapist village, or you, Todd, as a ripple effect on the dad. And again, the other thing that I'm looking for is how can we link existing strengths that are already in the community or mapping to what we're doing with the family. I want to literally work smarter, not harder. So you put out this document. This is part of the bonus where people can get this document and share it with their community, because I think it's really well written, and I think your superintendent also deserves a lot of credit as a visionary as well. So you put together something called a school-based mental health brief right before school starts. It's called a multi-tiered systems approach. I hope I had some input in that systems. Yay! MTSS. And right away, I look at the document, and I love what you say here. And you do it with a lot of other people. It's a team effort here. But what students and families need to know to be resilient, resiliency, build up their immunity. What are the behaviors and attitudes that are going to maximize student wellness? And you just underscored one where you said exercise, emotional health, working out, confidence. How do we teach it? How do we know if they've learned it? Like, what's something measurable? Let's not just do clinical guesswork here. Let's see if we can actually have measurable impact. And what are we going to do if they can't do it? How are we going to get the special education supports activated? And here's what I also love. What if they're already doing it? How can we take the students that are already doing well and make them even more stronger? How can we have special assistance to them? How can we, if they're gifted, how can we accelerate that? Most school administrators look at just the problem kids. You're also looking at building the resiliency of the kids that are doing pretty well right now. I love that. So here you come up with something I think is innovative. You and your team search out validated screening tools, and people will get this resource at the end, the parent health questionnaire, the general anxiety disorder. You said Park County has the second highest suicide rate in the nation, so you've got a suicide severity rating scale. You're going to pilot this with the freshmen, which includes Ryan. You're going to do a 15-minute screening tool. You're going to have the school counselors' roles clarify where they're going to analyze the results. And then you have a flow chart that you're developing with the community as a team of what's the intervention to best fit what's coming out of these assessment tools. So you're trying to have a best fit between, and you got examples already set up. You had a Montana family send in Verilux Happy Lights. We have seasonal affective disorder big time in Montana. Winter's coming. So again, you're already in this document coming up with, okay, what are we going to do once the assessment tool is done? It's brilliant. I mean, I can't say enough about it. So here, I say to myself, I'm licking my chops as a therapist going, man, I got to utilize this in the session. First of all, I want the family to know that their children are going to get this assessment tool. And then again, you come in brilliantly and say, I'm not even going to give it away at the end, but I'm going to wait for people to hear how cool this is. You connect the dots for me for the family, and well, I'm not going to spoil the surprise. So here, let's watch this in action where I bring up this document. The family's kind of mesmerized by it, and we see what happens here, and then you can see the surprise ending at the end. Okay. So what we're doing today is really fitting this goal, right, where we have a plan for behavior, emotional, and all that. Everything we're doing today, does that kind of fit number one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And there's going to be a screening tool, and are the boys going to take these tests? And then if you could explain to the parents what might be the benefit of this or whatever, because I think you're one of the first school systems that are going to use a screening tool to see if there's anything that we don't see on the surface. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that's right, Scott. So, we're going to pilot this first with the freshman class, but we're working so hard to make sure that the pilot goes well that we fully anticipate that we'll be able to scale it rather rapidly to grades 6 through 12. And this is an electronic version of 4 validated screening tools for depression, anxiety, but also resilience and emotional wellness. And these are the validated screeners that are part of this tool. The neat thing is we get back the results instantaneously. So if there is a crisis situation, we can respond right away. But I think, for Ryan and Lucas, I think that having access to this will be partially a way to check in on, how are we doing, but also over time, a way to see if there's growth. If it's a strong positive and we need more help, well, then we'll know that and we'll be able to follow our decision tree to, more intensive intervention if we think that's necessary.
Okay, so this would just help add further information to what we're already doing. So, and then we would just, based on the scores, we could meet again and see if there's anything we're missing. Is that close or way off?
No, that's exactly right. And then the hope would be that when we re-administer this in January, that the things that we've been doing have been working and we see a reduction.
Again, what I thought was brilliant, I want you to see my full face here. Okay. I love, this is called predictive analytics in the research world, and I'm also a researcher and a clinician. And what I loved about what you did is you connect the dots. You say to the family, look, this is a compliment to what we're doing. We can get measurable impact. You didn't use that word, but that was implied. And then in January, we can see, after we do the post-test, how far we're coming. And the family, I could see going, oh, that's cool. Did you know you were going to do that? Or, I don't know, I just thought that was awesome.
Well, again, Scott, I think it was just responding to the questions that were being asked and knowing the role I was in the meeting. But, the thing that has been missing from our MTSS engine has been the fuel. And the fuel is the assessments. It's those evaluations that we're able to give. And so that's going to help us, work with kids individually. It's going to tell us about students who need assistance, who we otherwise don't indicate that they do, who otherwise go unnoticed. But in another way, it's going to help us to plan all of our instruction and treatments for larger groups, because we'll be able to see, if a particular class, for example, has a higher rate of need for intervention than another class, maybe something that we would have done in a tier 2 environment out of the classroom with a small number of kids, we're now going to do for the whole class if enough students appear to need it. So just, taking a measurement first and then planning our instruction and our treatments accordingly.
Todd, how do you see family systems trauma fitting in to complement this after you watch the case, after you see it for a second time because you were in it, now you get to step back and watch it. How do you see the need for family systems trauma in the scheme of things going forward?
I see it as absolutely essential. And my rationale for that is if we look at what happens when we have breaks from school, when we look at something like office referrals, we will see a spike in unwanted behaviors that happens usually right after a break. And so what we think is that we're being relatively effective at teaching right practices and behaviors at school. But then during that break time, sometimes, a wrong behavior, an unwanted behavior gets randomly rewarded, and it becomes all that much more difficult to extinguish it again. So I just think that the family systems approach is so crucial, because during the hours away from school, or even during the hours at school, we're working on this thing as a team, rather than it being worked on in isolation in one place where it might not stick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the stickiness factor, can we get to second order change or more permanent change? So again, I thought this document represented a stepping on the moving train, not parked in the station. The value, again, you see of you as the co-therapist, and adapt or die. What I think this document represents in your team is you're adapting to the changing environment. You're being proactive. You're trying different things out. And I love adaptation in times of crisis. So, and you have measurable impact, not just clinical guesswork, or what I call, or what I don't call, but what research calls predictive analytics. So as we wrap up today, those are I hope we fulfilled our promise to you today, Todd and I, that you really saw, why this is needed, the benefits of a village using an agenda. I also want to, for some of you, for the last couple of years, I've been looking at this question: how can I help you as a personal coach go faster with these kind of tools? And so this is kind of like an overview of the FST model. And so if you take the book, as I promised earlier, you've got, 12 techniques. And so one of the ideas that I've come up with is designing an intensive course that you do online. And what I think the benefit of it is that people have a need for speed. They want to learn fast. They want to learn from the video. People don't have time to read a book. And so you're in the right place. And I want to invite you guys next month to a webinar I'm doing on the course, but even furthering this case out. I want to show what happens when I also share with the family the behavioral contract, or what I call in the model a FST trauma playbook. So you're invited to this one next month, which is there's trauma techniques I think we learned too late. That these techniques I'm going to share with you, the FST trauma playbook, and more about the extended family and other tools like undercurrents. I think if you learn these tools, it's going to really amp up your effectiveness. So the course is an advanced training course. I'll share a little bit about it with you. And so if you want to join live, it will be live, offered 3 times. And you can come to anyone you want to. And I think you'll really enjoy this one if you enjoyed today. So if you want to go deeper in this model, I want to show you how through this webinar, but also give you part 2 of what you saw today. So as I promised, I'm going to have Allison share with you the bonus and what to do to go ahead and grab that bonus. So Allison, let me pass the ball to you real quick.
Sure. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we would love to hear your key takeaway from today. So if you visit us on Facebook, you can either visit our page, Family Trauma Institute. I put the link in the chat box, and I'll do it again. If you're a member of our group, you can also leave your key takeaway in the group. We have a post on the webinar, so you can just leave it in the comment. Tell us, kind of what you learned from today's webinar. And for the folks that give us that feedback, which is really helpful to us, we will direct message you with a resource handout from today as a thank you. So we really appreciate you guys sharing your takeaways with us on Facebook. So with that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say with that, these are the 2 resources that you'll get: the brief today and also the agenda. So I wanted to leave some time left over today. Allison, if you had some open mic Q&A for Todd and I, we'll stay a few minutes after, but if those of you have to go, that's okay. And I'll leave this up for the webinar next week. So do we have some questions or comments about
we do.
Of today's stuff? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we actually have lots of questions. So we have a couple of questions that came in to ask about Ryan and his participation. So is Ryan asked about these goals at any point during the session? Why wasn't Ryan asked to give his opinion on the goals presented and how they may be tweaked? Great,
I'll answer that, and then Todd wants to answer it. The short answer is it's very strategic. Ryan has, this is a carryover contract from last year. We're updating it. And so Ryan's voice has been heard. What we found in a Zoom environment sometimes is that with Ryan wanting to take over the show, and there is a part of him that wants to be the chief and not want to have the hierarchy be that the adults are the pack leaders. There's an upside down hierarchy going on. If Ryan is involved in the discussion phase, he can just sometimes be a shark that smells blood in the water and go into a feeding frenzy. So it's much more efficient and effective to first go through the labor pains, metaphorically, with the adults, get on the same sheet of music, but leave the contract open for Ryan's voice. And in fact, if you attend next month's webinar, you'll actually get to see that in action, how Ryan gets to be part of, we call it a working draft. So it's very strategic of when we involve. And I guess, Todd, would you agree that if we had Ryan in here at this moment, the session could have gone a little bit upside down in a way?
Absolutely. We could almost say that we've done an ABA cause and effect experiment on that, because we've had times where he entered a meeting and started to sort of take over the meeting or draw most of the attention to himself. And we had to have him exit so that we could move a little bit further before we had him come back in and then agree and understand that what we were doing was in his best interest. And he does acknowledge that. He works with this system very well. He accepts that there are times that it's time for him not to be there.
Yeah, now he does. In the beginning he didn't, but he starts to see the benefits because kids want structure. They're begging for it, but they want it to be fair. So that's a great question. What's the next one, Allison?
Okay, the next question is, how do you engage the village? How do you have people, identify their village? We've had lots of families sign up, especially single parents, that they have no one. And they are extremely hesitant to involve them.
Well, in the next webinar, I'm going to be addressing that directly. I'm going to show an FST diagnostic tool that allows the family to pretty easily identify who's supportive and who's not supportive. It's a very creative way to get them. I don't want to share, the surprise on that, but I think you'll be very pleased when you see that technique. The second thing is we use a motivational, strategic series of questions to look at people's strengths and to help them see what's in it for them to bring the village in. People always got to know what's in it for me, what's FM. And so part of the reasons why I totally didn't get the village in is because I didn't know how to identify them. And then I didn't know what questions to ask to get the family to say, oh, now I understand why you need the village. It makes sense to me. And a lot of times I'll ask them to trust me with an experiment. And I'll say, what do we got to lose to try once? And so it's a combination cocktail of knowing where to tap, how to tap, and then having the confidence and swag to go in there and say, boy, this is uncomfortable for me. I never learned this in graduate school, but I got to go for it, because if I don't, who will? And so, I know, Todd, if you have any comments on that, if you see that some of the colleagues you work with, they get stuck there. They're not sure what to do with the village or whatever. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's some science and art in it. One of the things that you do really well, Scott, is that you do identify some people who maybe the system doesn't see as being a potential village member. But there are people within the family sometimes, or peripherally involved, who can nonetheless make a contribution despite some of the challenges that they face themselves. And so I think that we've learned a lot about that.
Thanks. Good question, by the way, guys. Allison, any others?
Yeah, we do. We had a lot of questions come in. So we have a question that is actually from two different people. They're somewhat related, so I'm going to give them both to you for the sake of time. So the first one is, how do the services vary when a family is not able to all sit down together? This model does not seem to consider the way that COVID-19 has disproportionately affected Black, Native Americans, and Latino families. When you talk about family trauma, it goes much further for families across the U.S. It is an absolute luxury that this family is able to pause and have a meeting like this. So that's the first question. Then the next question came in from someone who was asking about ideas on addressing barriers regarding virtual and telehealth with families. So they're both questions on barriers, one related to race and ethnicity, and the other with virtual and telehealth. So any thoughts on breaking through either of these barriers with engagement, increased stress, and all of those things?
Okay, Todd, do you want to take a crack at that, and then I've got a few thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, I think those are such excellent questions. We suddenly changed from a community where there was a lot of interaction and we really were promoting a lot of social togetherness, to one that now is similar to Eastern Montana communities, where you're 100 miles from the next community and there are only 15 people in yours. And so the question is just actually spot on, that it was a luxury that this family could get together. But I think that it underscores what we all have to do in terms of coming up with a new plan in this COVID era for telehealth and digital supports like this. The fact that we had to hold that meeting via Zoom was indicative of that. But we do have to go further. There are times when we won't have even any of the people in the same room and still have to have a way to bring them together.
I think it's an excellent question too. I addressed FST in working with the Black community last month, actually, with one of the panelists being Anaje Muhad, who's been using FST with the Black community. So I won't have time to speak on that, but maybe Allison can send that link to the person that wanted to know how this model works with other cultures, other races. The one thing I am amazed to see is small change and small wins make big changes, like throwing a pebble in a pond. So you may see that this was a luxury, but when the therapy is well organized, and even if you have some of the members in, that's the beauty of systems theory. You're activating sleeper cells, metaphorically, of positives. People want to do well. They want direction. When they get it quickly, and it's a therapy of action, you can see, even in this case, as a follow-up, the father has been more motivated and more activated than ever before. And the son is both sons are responding to that. And so we didn't have everybody there, but it really moved the system. So those are some really good questions. What's the next one, Allison?
There was just one question clarification that we'll do at the end here. The word you stated, was it preventative research? They were trying to take notes and they didn't catch what you said. And I'm not.
Well, I think the word I used was predictive analytics. That might have been where you're using assessment tools to drive decision making and not just doing clinical guesswork. So we're trying to combine science and art together through this methodology of using Todd and his team's instruments to also dovetail of what we're trying to do with treatment. Yep.
Okay, so that's
So
all we have time for.
that's preventative. Yeah, because we're trying to find the problems before they get too big. Because some of the kids are quiet in their dysfunction, and unless we know that something's going on, we won't attend to it, and then that's where you can get into suicide and all of that kind of areas as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, because there have been a few requests for the webinar that Dr. Sells was referring to, and you can actually, you can email me at info@familytrauma.com. However, the webinar is the YouTube link to the webinar is posted on Facebook and on our Facebook page and in our Facebook group. So you just have to scroll down just a little bit and the YouTube link is there and the whole webinar is there for you. So that's the fastest way for you to get that. Yeah, Elizabeth, I can, and you know what, I can add the link. I will. That's a good idea, Elizabeth. I will add the link in the Zoom email that goes out to all the participants tomorrow. I'll put the YouTube link in there. That'll be the fastest way to get it to everyone. So again, I'm going to thank everyone for being here today, and we're going to have to wrap up. A lot of folks have to get back to their classes and their schedule.
Yeah, I hope that the resource handouts will be really helpful to you all, and please share this with your colleagues about some of these ideas, because a lot of administrators, schools, and families are looking for some solutions. So I really enjoyed today. Todd, thank you again for being here and all the work you do, and you guys are the true heroes, and so we just, all of us appreciate you, and will you please take our virtual hugs back with you about everything you've done. So thank you again for what you're doing. So, and to all of you guys, thank you very much, and I hope to see many of you next month as we do the trauma techniques further. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.